Hello, this is a short video about the formation of participles for Latin GCSE. Now, before we talk about the formation of participles, I think it's important to try and understand what a participle is. A participle is a verbal adjective, i.e. it is a describing word formed from a verb. But rather than telling us what a noun is like, whether it's tall or short, big or small, a participle is going to tell us what a noun is doing, or maybe what it's done or is going to do in the future. So like other adjectives in Latin, a participle must agree with the noun that it is describing in terms of gender, masculine, feminine or neuter, number, whether it's singular or plural, and case, nominative, accusative, genitive, etc. However, because they are formed from verbs, participles will also have a tense and a voice. Now, if we have a look at the table here, we can see that there are three tenses of participle: present, perfect and future. However, there is no such thing as a present passive participle, no such thing as a future passive participle, and we can see that perfect active participles are formed from deponent verbs only. So let's start with our present active participle. We can see from the principal parts of paro at the top that our present active participle is formed from the stem of the first two principal parts, paro. And to this we add the characteristic vowel combination for each conjugation and the letters ns. So we get parans for group 1, monens for group 2, for group 3 we add an E, mitens, and group 4 we add an I and an E, so we get audiens. Now a present active participle is going to decline like the third declension adjective ingens, and so parans is the nominative singular, but parantis is our genitive singular, and so we can see therefore that the stem is parant. A present active participle will mean while preparing, i.e. it is describing an action that is going on at the same time as the action of the main verb. Now, our perfect passive participle, our PPP, is the most common participle in Latin, and it is formed from the fourth principal part. In fact, it is just the fourth principal part, paratus. But it is going to decline like the first and second declension adjective, bonus. So we're going to have paratus It's going to go like servus in the masculine, puella in the feminine, and bellum in the neuter. And it's going to mean having been prepared. It is perfect and it's passive. Now, having been prepared is not a particularly common phrase in English, so we might want to drop the having been and just have prepared. One thing to remember about PPPs is that because they are formed from the fourth principal part, each conjugation is going to work in the same way. But it's a case that it is important to learn your principal parts. Without knowing the supine, the fourth principal part of a verb, it is difficult to recognise the PPP. Perfect active participle, we've said, formed from deponent verbs only. And this is going to be formed from the third principal part of a deponent verb, but without the present tense of sum. So for example, just conatus, and this too is going to decline like bonus, so we have conatus Now this is a perfect participle, but it's active, so it's going to mean having tried. Again, it's important here to learn principal parts of verbs, but in particular to know your deponent verbs, because otherwise you might think that a perfect active participle should be translated as having been something. Our last participle is a future active participle, also formed from the fourth principal part, but we add the letters UR before the ending, and so we end up with pararturus. This too will decline like bonus, and so we have pararturus It's going to mean about to prepare, i.e. it is describing an action that is taking place after the action of the main verb. So just to summarise, we can see that we have our present active participle formed from the stem of the first two principal parts, and our other three, our perfect active participle, our perfect passive participle, and our future active participle, are all formed from our supine, our fourth principal part, and decline like bonus. Now our present participle is the only one that declines like ingens, and so that makes it perhaps a little bit harder in terms of identifying the case. So we do just need to look at the endings of our present active participles a little bit more carefully. There's going to be another video talking about the uses of the participle, and in particular looking at the ablative absolute.